Hi, Rama. It's week 8, day 2 of our Bible narrative reading plan. Today we're in Exodus chapters 7 through 9. The chapter begins with the Lord reminding Moses that Aaron would go along with Moses. Aaron would act as a prophet for Moses, speaking to Pharaoh. But God reminds Moses that Pharaoh is going to harden his heart, and ultimately God will also harden Pharaoh's heart. And so that God would be glorified as being ruler of all the earth, greater than anyone on earth, even greater than Pharaoh. And so Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh, and even before the 10 plagues begin, we have this first pre-sign or early sign, something that's not normally counted as part of the 10 plagues, but it is an act of God's work on behalf of his people Israel. And so Aaron throws down his staff, and it turns into a snake. And then the magicians of Egypt, they throw down their staffs and they turn into a snake. But then Aaron's staff, which is now a snake, eats the staff that's turned into a snake by the hands of the magicians. And so even as the magicians of Egypt are competing, they are attempting to duplicate what God is doing through Moses and Aaron. It still seems to be pretty evident, except to themselves, that God is greater and God is superior. But then the plagues begin, and you notice that the magicians of Egypt, they're trying to compete. They're trying to duplicate that, and they're successful in the beginning. So with the first plague, the water is turned into blood. Everywhere throughout the land, the water is turned to blood. But then the magicians do the same thing. And so Pharaoh hardens his heart, because why should he trust Moses and Aaron? Why should he believe in this God? Because his magicians can do the same thing. But then the second plague comes in chapter 8, and the frogs invade the land, and the magicians of Egypt also do the same thing. And so again, Pharaoh hardens his own heart. Pharaoh comes to Moses, asking, eventually say, please take away the frogs. Please pray to your God to take away these frogs. And they say, okay, we'll pray. When do you want them to go away? And he says, tomorrow. Not immediately, but tomorrow. So we see that Pharaoh's heart, he's not repentant. He's certainly not turning his heart toward God. He's hardening his heart. Then we see this third plague in the middle of chapter 8, and it's the plague of gnats. And notice what the magicians did this time. Verse 18 of chapter 8 says, the magicians tried by their secret arts to produce gnats, but they could not. Then the magician said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them, just as the Lord had said. And then the plagues continue. You have the fourth plague of being the flies, and the fifth plague, the Egyptian livestock die, and then the sixth plague boils throughout the land. And again, the magicians pop up, chapter 9, verse 11, and the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils. For the boils came upon the magicians and upon all the Egyptians. But the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not listen to them as the Lord had spoken to Moses. So even as Pharaoh has plenty of reason to listen to Moses and Aaron, he does not. Even as he tries to assert his own authority and yet still beg that Moses and Aaron would have their God cease these plagues, his heart's not changing. You see in the fifth plague there in chapter 9, verse 7, that Pharaoh sent people to check and make sure that Israel was actually okay during all of this. Chapter 9, verse 7 says, and Pharaoh sent, and behold, not one of the livestock of Israel was dead. But the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people go. You see, Pharaoh is further incriminating himself. He continues to harden his own heart, even as God already knew this would happen, and even as God eventually seals Pharaoh in this hardness of heart. Pharaoh is building up his own guilt because he sees the works of God. He knows that this must be from God, that it can't be from his own magicians. He doesn't have the authority or the power to do these things, and yet he's still trying to somehow maintain control. And then the seventh plague comes here in chapter 9, the hail, which impacts all of the land. And we have great detail with this, and we see how it's impacting so much of Egypt and Pharaoh's household and all. But again, at the end of chapter 9, it says, so the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people of Israel go, just as the Lord had spoken through Moses. So God had told Moses this was going to happen, and we see it played out over and over and over, that Pharaoh is hardening his heart. He will not listen to God. He's trying to be God because that's what the people of Egypt expected of him. They expected their ruler to be a deity. And yet God is making clear that he is lifting up Pharaoh for this opportunity so that the entire world will know that there's one true God, and it's not Pharaoh. Here's a summary of today's reading. For more information, go to tunemyheart.org.